Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, if you've taken the roll.
The roll's been taken.
Thank you. I guess we better go through the procedures. I'd like to remind the task force, the staff, and our viewing public the electronic participation policy for virtual meetings. Staff and delegates are reminded to keep their video and microphones off until requested by the chair. Further, in the event of connection service interruptions occurs that affect quorum, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. All rules for delegation under the city's procedural bylaw continue to apply, and the full corporate policy 50 regarding electronic and virtual meetings is available online for review. Having said that, are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, we have no presentations today or delegations. We do have one item for consideration today, and could I get a mover for that, please? Item 4.1. Moved by Jan, seconded by Jan and Dan. Okay, could you read the resolution you've moved, please, Councillor Vanderstel?
We have moved just one item for consideration, I believe, Mr. Chair.
That's what you just moved. I'd just like you to read that one item, please.
Park and sports field user fees, financial impact, 33,650 increased revenue, 2021-690. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the item? Okay, we have Councillor Vanderstel.
Yes, I think Brian is on the call today, Brian Hughes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he is.
Through you to Brian. So I guess I'm a little, I'm happy to see that we're actually increasing the fees here, more in keeping with the fees for the use of similar fields in surrounding municipalities. That makes sense. That's good. That's fiscally responsible. But I guess you probably already pre-guessed what I'm going to ask you. When we find damage to our fields in our grounds as a result of rental to other parties, or as a result of illegal parking that's been going on for an extended period of time, Brian, how do we recoup those losses? Because, you know, obviously we have to go in and correct the situation. We have to repair the turf. It takes staff hours, takes staff time, and it takes it takes yearly maintenance and upkeep. How do we recoup those losses?
Good question. Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, there's a couple of ways we do it. Number one, if we know the damage is a direct impact of the user group that's utilizing that facility, then we would go after the group as a first step. If there was a damage deposit required for their use, we would draw from the damage deposit to make the repairs. And obviously they would not be entitled to that deposit, that damage deposit back, if that was the case. Based on the example you're using, though, it sounds like the damages, you correct me if I'm wrong, are from another group that aren't directly related to the sports field users. So in the case of, let's say, Steve Brown Sports Complex, where we had a problem with the ball hockey people parking illegally, we would go over that. We would go and enter into discussions with that leaseholder, because there's language in their lease that they need to control their people, and they are also responsible for damages. So whether it be damages to the park indirectly as a result of them parking illegally, you know, we would go after them and try to retain damages through them. And then we want to put processes in place to make sure these damages don't continue, which I think, you know, we're underway doing right now, redesigning where they're parking, maybe putting up barriers so they aren't going onto the grass. And when I say barriers, they are, you know, well-designed barriers that you know, work into the streetscape and the beauty of the park. So there are different measures we're looking at to control these situations, but we do recover costs. Same with special events. If there's a special event happening in the facility, there's quite a large damage deposit required, and they are responsible for all damages.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstelt. Councillor McCurry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, have we had dialogue with the users?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with regards to the rate increase, I'm assuming?
Yes, to what they will consider to be a whopping big increase.
At this point, we have not.
Okay. I think we probably should do that. And maybe we'll ponder adding some wording to that before we finish up today. Brian, do you know who the owner is of the baseball diamond that's beside the dog park on Gilkison?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I do. That is owned by the church that is just down the street from that baseball diamond.
That's suitable for kids play, right? I mean, if it were renovated, it's suitable for kids play.
Yes, it would be. If it was renovated, it would require some work. Yes.
Have we given some thought to having a chat with those folks about putting that diamond into service?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I had a chat with them, and I'm going to guess it was 15 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah, we had that discussion. At that time, I think some of the people involved have probably changed and moved on. They were agreeable at that time, 15 years ago, to do that. And I believe at that time, minor ball didn't necessarily have a need at that time for that age group. That could potentially have changed today. I'm not sure, but they were amicable to it at the time because we were in agreement to take on the maintenance as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I'm going to move a couple of amendments to this before we finish up today, okay?
That's fine. Indy, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just through the chair to Councillor McCurry. So part of the report is to look at our fields as well, because, you know, as you know, Southwest was requiring 4 fields. So we do have a shortage. And you're exactly right. That area of the city has potential for some sort of fields, diamonds to make up for the loss. So as part of the report, you'll note that it does speak to doing a vision of our sports and what our capacity is and our limits are right now. As you know, the growth lands really at this point doesn't show large swaths of land for sport. And so we're very limited to what we have. So I think that's very important for us to do that exercise.
Thanks, Indy. You finished, Doc, for now, Councillor McCurry?
10-4.
Very good. Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was a little bit late. You know, I really like what Councillor McCurry had to say. I think that's critical to have the information out. And I want to thank staff. It was a really detailed report, but I kind of got lost in those spreadsheets when you were looking at I was trying to find a really simple spreadsheet, the proposed rates of 10% and how that would compare to our competitors, County and Brant, you know, Tallman, Norfolk, Cambridge and whatnot. But let me ask you just sort of a broad question. If we do increase at 10%, where would we sit then in relation to those alternate service providers, facility providers? Average, higher, lower?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think it's safe to say it would be average in most cases. It might be slightly higher for some of our, shall we call them, signature complexes, the Arnold Anderson stadiums of the world that require additional costs. They consume more cost than your standard sports field. And as a result, the cost implication might be a little higher there with regards to the rate when you compare it to others. What we found though was various municipalities use different means of creating their rates and fees. So in some cases it was apples to apples. In other situations it wasn't, because they have unique ways of creating their rates. They have different rates for different times of days. They have different rates for adults, substantially higher than children or youth. So we accounted for all of that and tried to come together with our best projection that on one hand wouldn't be so drastic that the users would say, oh geez, we can't control this, but on the other hand matched well with what we were looking at with respect to our costs and trying to balance that profit deficit margin and be fair in doing it. So we thought, you know, our standard increase is generally around 2%. We look back at some of the history through 17 and 18 previous years where we held the line. We didn't actually increase at all. So when we account for all these variables and then consider, a 10% increase this year, especially after reduced rates over the COVID periods where they, we know they couldn't play games, but they could practice at a much reduced cost. In some ways they have gained the benefit of reduced costs over the year. And I think this is just a mechanism to adjust that to what I think is a fair rate that is comparable. And in some cases higher, in some cases, a little lower.
And well, the most obvious would be the County of Brent. I see our rates will be slightly higher than theirs. And it'd be nice to see their rates instead of having to flip to another page to see it if it was right beside our proposed rates. But what's the supply like in the County of Brent for comparable facilities? Do they have an excess supply? Or are they facing the same kind of supply demand issues we are?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think it's safe to say they don't necessarily have the level of facilities that we do. I'm not aware of a Bison's or a Kiwanis field in the county. Now I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of that.
Yeah.
And I'm not
But
necessarily.
take the high quality fields out of it, okay?
Right. Okay.
So so now I'm talking about the lower level fields, right? That a lot of the recreational adult users use, and they're the ones that are having trouble getting time, right?
Right.
And so how do their facilities, the supply of those types of facilities, which would be most comparable to ours, where are they at?
My understanding is they're not necessarily having trouble fulfilling their demands at this time. They have quite a few facilities and quite a few fields to share. And I'm not aware of there being a shortage in the county. I don't think they're experiencing the growth like we are in Brantford.
Right. Have we ever thought about looking at where the pinch point is the greatest, which I think is on the baseball diamonds, right, for the recreational adult users? Or have I got that wrong?
No, Mr. Mayor, you're correct there. That is correct.
Have we approached the county to say, hey, can you seem to have one of the same capacity issues we have, and can we work something out with you that you'll get a little, make it worth their while, so to speak, to work with them jointly? So we're kind of doing this on a regional basis. Have we ever considered that or broached that subject with them?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, not officially. I don't think we've officially made that step. What we find though is if the user groups can't book here, their automatic next step is to go to the county, and they will do that. And then we're already out of the game because they're already taking that step to say, okay, we're going to book our league play with the county because we know they have availability.
So do we actually, in our material, would we consider adding in the contact number for the county? Kind of encourage them, and like probably could cause us problems, but
well, it would, but it's not that staff wouldn't suggest that if we're working together, which we are, indirectly, and staff say, listen, I need this venue, and we realize the city of Brantford just doesn't have it to provide. Of course, staff are going to say, have you tried the county? Here's some options that might be viable for you.
Maybe you should ask the county if they're okay with that.
We can certainly do that.
Okay, sorry, I see Brian. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Yes, Brian, did you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, please. I know we did some agreements approved by council on Tuesday night. In my many discussions with the CEO at the county, this has been broached, but very, very, very early early stages. We talked about some joint use of some facilities or maybe even joint builds, but that's very, very early discussions as part of kind of what else we want to talk about in the future. So, but that is in its infancy, Mr. Mayor.
Can I ask, Mr. Chair, can I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
So the high quality facilities we have, the artificial turf fields, and I assume they would probably want to get some access into that, would they not? And do we have the capacity to take on some county-driven demand for the grade A quality facilities?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we certainly have the ability to take on additional use in our artificial turf fields. I'm not aware that the county has come to us and say, we want to program your artificial turf fields. That hasn't happened. When we were looking at doing something in Ward 1 with regard to the Southwest, and at one time we were talking about, there was an investigation of a joint venture for an indoor recreational type of facility, artificial turf in the second phase. We did reach out to the county and said, would you be interested in partnering in this? And they were not. They were not interested. They said they had their own facilities and that they didn't want to pursue that. So we have reached out in some respect with regards to the artificial turf. We can certainly, it's certainly there and available if they want to rent it and program it. The problem is everybody wants to rent it and program it at the same time, right? Whether it's an artificial or a baseball diamond, everybody seems to play at that perfect time that works for them. And it's these off hours that are more problematic to fill and rent.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just got I guess a couple of questions, Brian. Firstly, I think anything that the county does in building facilities, there's always a fundraising component to it. It doesn't seem to matter, what they do. They get fundraising with it, and I don't think we're in that situation that we can do that type of thing. I think folks expect that their property tax will probably cover their recreational need, where I think the rural part of the county suggests that those people are quite happy to pay extra and fundraise. So we have trouble competing when they're getting donated money and we're using taxpayer money. We're at a disadvantage, I guess I would say. But regarding this report, Brian, have you built these numbers, the anticipated 10% into your budget for 2022? Is that already built in?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe it is.
Okay, because my concern, if it was, I think it's been suggested, and I think there's probably an amendment coming forward that before this committee approves and makes a recommendation on these rates, that we have a discussion with the end user. And if that should end up in some kind of a compromise at 5% or 7% or whatever the result, and maybe it'll stay at 10, I don't know. But after that conversation, that's not going to affect your operating budget then for next year.
That is correct. Our operating budget for next year is not based on an increase of 10% at this time.
Okay. If the 10% is approved, where does that additional funding go? Like we must be running a deficit now. We don't get cost recovery out of these facilities. Do we know a percentage? Are we getting 80% back, 20% back? Do we know that number?
I think in the charts that we've provided in the report, you can see the surplus deficit based on the revenues we're receiving for each of the facilities and an overall number. And you can see we're running at a deficit, quite substantial deficit for all of our sports facilities. By increasing by 10%, what's that going to do? It's going to minimize that deficit is what it's going to do. It's going to make that deficit smaller. Is it going to change the service? No, it's not going to change the service. We're still providing the same service level, but we're just going to reduce that deficit. Okay.
And just finally, Brian, I know every time we get into discussions with the user groups, they'll say, well, in this city or that city, the city allows the user to say paint the lines, and that saves a whole lot of money. We don't allow that here, if my understanding is correct. We look for consistency. I think that all parks are done the same and all lines are done properly. We're not letting volunteers get loose with white paint and that type of thing. Are we still of that same mindset? We're still operating in that same manner?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a good question. So when you talk about service, you're correct. The city of Brantford provides a higher quality of service with regards to sports field lining and marking than most municipalities. A lot of them allow the users to line them when they prepare the ball diamonds, and they give them the materials and say, okay, the rest is up to you. You measure it out, you do your lining, you do your chalking and all of that. We don't. We do keep it in-house, and we do it with our staff and prepare all diamonds based on the required measurements and dimensions they need. Is it an option to hand that over? It certainly is. It's certainly something we've mentioned in the report and something that we could consider to reduce some operational costs. It would be a change in service, obviously. And the question I would have is if we presented that change in service and said to the user, you take over the responsibility of chalking your ball diamond, I think they're going to turn back to us and say, okay, where's the reduction in my rate now? Because, I'm doing this. So it's something we'd have to consider. And it certainly has, it's certainly positive on both sides. It's certainly something to consider. It's something we've thought of. But I think it's safe to say our level of service is higher than most other municipalities.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Councilor McCreary for a second time.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Brian, in the report, we had the total cost of our expenditures to operate the fields. Can you convert that to an hourly rate before this comes to council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it is in there in an hourly rate. I think there's a chart, if you go to section 5.4 that says sports field maintenance, and you look right at the bottom of it, you'll see the hourly rates based on each of the facilities that we outlined. So there's a couple hourly rates I've included in this report. One is based on the total amount of available hours. So this is the cost to maintain, Councilor McCurry. I think that's what you're asking for.
Can you direct me to the page number? Because I didn't.
It's page
not see
7
it.
in my
I'm sorry.
in my report. It's page 7, the report I'm looking at.
Page 7. Okay.
So there's a chart there. It's under section 5.4. It's titled sports field maintenance. So if you look at the very bottom of that chart, under the you'll see there's an actual hourly usage. There's the rentable hours, which means this is the total amount of hours that are rentable in the facility. If we maxed out 100% and we rented our facilities 100%, those are the amount of hours you could have.
Sorry, got it. Okay, so
and then I broke it down to the hourly rate based on the cost based on what we're renting now. So there's an hourly cost based on what we rent, and then there's another hourly cost based on if we maxed out. And
so let me ask you this then. I wonder if it might be advisable for you to redo the rate chart that we've got that shows what the proposed rates are going to be for 2022. And beside that rate, if you could insert the actual cost of doing that, okay?
Yes.
Can you make that change before this comes to committee of the whole?
Yes.
Okay. I think that, I mean, I didn't see that in the report, and it's all my fault, but other people may not see it in the report either. And, you know, when the public sees that it's costing us, you know, $100 an hour and we're charging 17, I think they'll get it why we want to increase the prices. Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I've got, so I do have 2 amendments, Mr. Chair. Do you want me to do the first one now?
Sure.
Okay. So the amendment would be to direct staff to consult with the owners of the Gilkison Street baseball diamond and I guess that's it. Consult with the owners of the baseball diamond to see if we can put it into use.
Okay, do you have a seconder for that? The mayor, Mr. Mayor? Okay, any discussion on that? Seeing no discussion, I would call the question. All in favor? It's carried unanimously. You have a second one?
The second one, Mr. Chair, that this report as amended by Brian, sorry, I don't need to say that bit, that this report be forwarded to field user groups and that they be advised of the schedule when this will come for debate at Committee of the Whole and Council.
Okay, it's seconded by Councillor Vanderstel. Discussion on that. Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Curry, you might consider an amendment, a friendly amendment, because I think you said and come before us committee of the whole, but maybe it's better if it's sent to them seeking and requesting their input and comment regarding the user fees prior to it coming to committee of the whole.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. That's good.
That's friendly? Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think we want to have that debate going on TV. I think that debate should take place where people are comfortable talking, the user groups, and have that discussion with staff, and then it come forward in a recommendation to council. Okay. Further discussion on the amendment as amended friendly? No, all in favor? It's carried unanimously. Is there further discussion, further amendments? Seeing none, then we'll call the vote on the resolution as amended. Any discussion on that? No. Okay. All in favor? It's carried. We have one consent item on our agenda today. I think that did it for actionable items. So we just have the one consent item. Could I get a mover for that? Put it on the floor. Councillor Vanderstel, seconded by Councillor McCurry. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? It's It's carried. I don't believe there's any other business before this committee or task force this morning. So I guess having said that, we'll adjourn and go play in the rain. We're
Well
adjourned.
done, Mr. Chair.
We got through it.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Well done. Take care.